Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoia here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. Oklahoma picks up its 15th commitment in the 2025 class, with Tristan Haynes making that announcement on Tuesday afternoon. Obviously, it's a really big deal. Josh McCuistion back in the Houston HQ studios. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page. Real quick, a little bit of housekeeping business. Really good promo for you out there watching on YouTube right now. Just all you got to do is use promo code OU1, $1 for 2 months to SoonerScoop.com. Plenty of coverage here as I think, kind of get our way into the summer. The final week of school, actually, here in Norman. But $1, 2 months, promo code OU1, special offer, special YouTube exclusive for you out there watching. Thanks for joining us once again, and some really good news, obviously. We were with you last week with Dominic Williams making the announcement on the live stream. Thank you to everybody that watched that. But Josh, another piece of the puzzle comes together in Oklahoma's 2025 class with the commitment of Tristan Haynes, and you can read Josh's breakdown. We'll get into a little bit of it here, but I think simply put, a nearly ideal fit for Oklahoma, I think was the term that you used, in Jay Valai with the announcement and the commitment of the Carl Albert standout.
I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, guys, but it's clear, like I said last week, Oklahoma has a type at corner. I mean, you look at Malik Hawkins, Cortland Guillory, and Tristan Haynes that Oklahoma's reeled in all within the last month here, and all of them are similar frames, similar types of players, very physical guys, want to come up, play, run. Are the big enough guys to play safety if that's what you needed them to do? Now, that's not the plan. I don't want anybody to get confused, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. These are guys that have a lot of versatility in their game. I think they are very comfortable using their length and size to come up and play press if that's what Oklahoma needs them to do. At the same time, and I think particularly in the case of Tristan Haynes, I think Tristan Haynes is probably the guy with maybe the most upside of this trio, because you're talking about a legitimate, potential track champion in the 400 meters. He ran one of the better times in 5A last year in the regional round. So, last week. So there's a lot of pieces here that make a lot of sense with Tristan Haynes. And again, I was telling him while we're doing our interview, I think he has a 15-minute highlight video on Huddle or something crazy like that. And it's not like, oh, he made a catch for 3 yards. Like, it's all just big play after big play. And again, I think this is a commitment that maybe some OU fans, maybe they expected because he's at Carl Albert and we know all the success OU's had at Carl Albert. But again, I think this is a really good player that maybe won't be as appreciated as he should be, for a year or two here.
And I will say, in some of these highlights that you're seeing now, you see Tristan Haynes. He does a lot on both sides of the ball for the Titans, the defending national champion. They might be the national champion of the 5A ranks, but the defending state champion. We saw him quite a bit this past season here against Shawnee, returning a punt. But you do see both sides of it in terms of what he's able to do with the at the wide receiver position, catching some balls this past season for Kevin Sperry. But once again, he's playing on the defensive side of the ball. I just wanted to make sure that people kind of got those ins and odds right.
Josh, I wanted to ask you, though, we talked a lot last week, I think it was the last recruiting report, about what they were going to do at corner, and it seemed like, obviously, at the time that it's going to be Tristan Haynes. Now that it is him, does that mean that Kobe Sellers likely will not be a part of this class, I'm guessing?
Yeah, that's very much my feel. I think it kind of came down to we talked about it, that there was going to be an expiring timeline. And the story that's up on the front page of Sooner Scoop right now, which, again, as Eddie said, you can read for $1 for 2 months. He made a comment. Like, he let Jay Valai and Brent Venables know at the spring game. So did Cortland Guillory. Almost immediately following that, you started to hear all this talk about Kobe Sellers and Texas A&M and all these things that were going on. And then, boom, Kobe Sellers announces he's going to make his decision on May 11th. So I think you can kind of connect the dots there that, again, Oklahoma loved Kobe Sellers. I don't want to make it sound like, they didn't. At the same time, I think they really thought, hey, we'd take any of these guys. We like all of them. And Guillory and Haynes decided not to waste time and and wanted to go ahead and get in the boat, and that's what happened. And Oklahoma, frankly, just ran out of spots at corner.
Josh, I may be reaching here, but when you have a kid in Oklahoma, in the state of Oklahoma, like Tristan Haynes, and you're trying to just choose between him and maybe somebody in the Texas area or out of state somewhere else, do you get the sense that this staff maybe leans towards those Oklahoma kids and that being a priority? I don't know if that's maybe just simplifying it, but is that something that maybe played a factor in here too? Is that say, hey, we really want to take the Oklahoma kid
from a school that they have a very, very good relationship with?
Sure. And with that's a really interesting storyline to follow, because like we talked about, when Jeff Lebby left Oklahoma, that direct connection that they had with Mike Dunn and the staff there at Carl Albert, I don't want to say it was severed, but it changed. I mean, it was a different kind of relationship. It's not, as deep and long running, and Oklahoma was going to have to figure that out. So you wonder a little bit if like Tristan Haynes became a bigger priority and said, okay, we want to make sure that we know Carl Albert in Oklahoma that's still, on the same page, because we know Carl Albert's going to have more guys coming through. That's just the way that program is. What is interesting in this situation, because generally, George, I would say yes. Like, you're going to prioritize an Oklahoma kid, and then probably after that a Dallas kid. You're going to go to the closest proximity and places that you're likely to recruit again. But what's interesting with Kobe Sellers is not only is he at a really good program in Dallas, like Shadow Creek, a really good program in Houston, like Shadow Creek, but at the same time, they're trying to make a lot of inroads in Houston, and he knows a lot of the kids. There's a lot of relationships there. He is good friends with Max Granville, one of their primary targets at edge. So there is kind of a give and take to that. Like, I could argue that either way. I think probably it comes out in the wash. I know that's kind of a, just sitting on the fence kind of answer, but I do think in this particular scenario, it's a little different than it normally would be. And in most cases, you're dead on that they would absolutely say, hey, the Oklahoma kid every time if all things are equal.
To add on top of that, 15th commitment in the class, the 5th Oklahoma commitment. And Josh, we've talked about it before in terms of the 2025 class and how good this group is going to be. I've talked about it, I feel like, for now 2 years as they move into their senior season. He joins Elijah Thomas, Alexander Shield Knight, Trinae Washington, Marcus James, who are obviously teammates at Carl Albert, and Kevin Sperry would have been the 6th, but he's now at Denton Geyer. In terms of what Jay Valai's been able to do here, we've now talked about it here over the last couple of years. You're starting to stack classes. And as you said, it appears that this group is now done, specifically at the quarterback position. It's not to say that nobody expected this. I think that Jay Valai had some skins in terms of recruiting at big programs, but it does seem like this is starting to become a little bit of a thing, almost as much as it is with the wide receiver position with Emmett Jones, how you just look at it and you go, yep, they're going to be closed up by, middle of, I guess it'd be the second week of May now, but early in the process.
Yeah, and guys, when I see the size, like we talked, started off talking about how big this class of corners is, it reminds me of a conversation I had with one of the staffers back right after the Peach Bowl, the LSU-Oklahoma game that I know a lot of OU fans will hate me even remembering. But what was interesting is when they were talking about walking out on the field, and particularly at defensive back, it was like, look at their guys and look at our guys, and it's not the same. Now, as you head into the SEC, you look at the size in that corner room. It's unbelievable. Guys, I would be hard-pressed to believe there are 5 schools that is, and particularly at corner, are bigger, longer, rangier than what Oklahoma has with Gentry Williams, Kenai Walker, Jacoby Johnson, Des Malone. I mean, you go down the list, and then you're adding in these young guys to kind of continue that momentum. Jay Valai, again, and Jay Valai, I wonder if there are some smaller corners that are like, hey, man, you're one of us, because Jay's not the biggest guy in the world, but he sees what it is. He knows that these big, long guys can make life a lot easier. And that's clearly been a focus. And with all 3 guys, I think they bring a little something different to the table. And it's hard. I would say as you look at the classes, the different rooms that Oklahoma's built in this 2025 class, I think corner's got to be the one that you say, okay, yeah, that's a really strong unit. And something that I think Oklahoma would have thought of pretty near ideal to what they were hoping to do.
That kind of reminds me of a conversation that we had, maybe even going back into a year ago, last spring, when Tristan was obviously going into his junior season. I remember I think it was after we had left Carl Albert, maybe one of the first times that we had saw Marcus James out there. And I just remember thinking that he might have been, talking about Tristan Haynes, he might have been like one of the lower, quote unquote, recruited guys on the program, just in terms of what he's been able to do here over the last year. Is it crazy to say, and I think it was said at the time, that he could end up being the best one out of this Carl Albert group, this small select group here over the last couple of years with Mike Dunn?
I think of all the Carl Albert guys, and this honestly includes Kevin Sperry, I think he's got more upside than any of them. Like, he is, again, he's one of those guys, like, he shows up at camp, and I would say, we've talked a lot about Elijah Thomas and how long and athletic he is. They're very similar physically, like about 6'1", 6'1", super long arms, very twitched up. There's not a lot that you could say, if I'm building my perfect corner, he's going to be this, this, and this, that Tristan Haynes doesn't check that box. Like, again, he is a raw player that's going to need time. But the physical tools, kind of like Jacoby Johnson a couple of years ago, the physical tools are off the charts. They are there. Anything you could want him to do, he is right there. And with a guy like we've talked about before that is a technician and a very detail-oriented coach like Jay Valai, it seems like a really perfect fit. Like, this is the kind of guy that I think Jay Valai will get a lot out of during his college career.
Josh, we're going to get into your Hot 11 here and some of these other guys, but I want to ask you, they're at 15 commits now in this class. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the numbers. How many more guys do you think there's room for in this class?
Guys, it's crazy because when I talk to people, and I mean, it's been pretty constant since early on that it was going to be a smaller class because as you look at it, there's 15 seniors on their way out on our scholarship chart. And again, that's a little give and take. With the PWOs and all the stuff they can do now, it's a little different, but that's got to be in the ballpark, correct? Give or take a player or two here or there. So there's not many spots left, but when you look at it, guys, I still think they want 4 more offensive linemen. I still think they want, several defensive linemen, probably at least 1 more receiver, 1 safety, 2 safeties. I mean, like we've talked about it. So you just do that right there. Okay, you're at 22, 23 right there. And there's still a few positions where you could say, well, do they want to take a true inline tight end, or is Trinae Washington just going to be the guy at tight end? There is a lot of volatility. And I was talking to somebody the other day, I was like, I can't see how this class is smaller than 25 or 26, which would mean there would have to be somewhere around 10 departures in the portal. And I don't see that on the roster. We've watched OU kind of, I don't know, urge guys or, just kind of say, hey, maybe there's a brighter future for you somewhere else. This roster, as it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, it's harder and harder to find those guys where you say, well, he just doesn't fit. That guy's not going to be part of the plan. So I don't know. Like, I think it's real. If you made me guess, I'd say it's somewhere around 24 or 25. Maybe the two ideas kind of meet in the middle. But I can absolutely see an argument for 27. And at the same time, I've been told repeatedly 23 is probably as far north as they can go as they see it. So this is, like I said, I think that is going to be something really interesting to track, and what OU kind of prioritizes here in the summer when we know there's going to be more and more commitments starting to come down the pipe.
Somewhat of a good problem to have.
It'll be even more interesting to see like just how active they are. And I think they're going to be active. Obviously, they're going to be wanting guys if there are guys out there in the portal. But it is going to be kind of interesting here over the next couple of years. Do they start not phasing it out by any means, but I think in Brent's perfect little circle or perfect world, they would like to just be able to go grab a couple guys here and there. If a Dominic Williams were to present itself, that's when you go jump at it. Right. Maybe not having to chase some guys like they have had to over the last couple of years. Speaking of offensive line, Josh, you put out your Hot 11 here recently. Darius Afalava, is that how you say it? That's going to be about as close as we're going to get.
With, yeah.
All right, well then, credit to me for being perfect. He was number 10. Bill Beatenbow did go out and see him yesterday, I believe, out in Utah. Him alongside, let's just call it Big Tone, the kid out of Southwest Oklahoma, down by Lawton. But Agumora, is that how we're saying it as well? Those were the two offensive linemen, though, within the group. We talked about the 2025 group just in terms of what that is going to mean for Bill Beatenbow. Still a big group out there. You got the big names like a Ty Haywood or Michael Fasusi, who we can hit on here shortly. But those two guys were guys that you had in the Hot 11. Is there a reason for feeling so good about that to put them in?
Yeah, much as, and I want to give some scoopers credit, I had missed a post from Kade like probably a month ago, and it had just flown under my radar that he had set a date, and it's literally 2 weeks from today that he will make his college announcement on May 21st. He's taken a few officials. We know he was at Oklahoma for the spring game, and again, just everybody I've talked to, I think there is a real connection between his family and the way Brent Venables recruits and the way Bill Beatenbow is as a coach. I mean, this is a guy from Saipan, a guy from a military background family. Like, there is a lot that makes perfect sense for Bill Beatenbow. We've seen guys that come in, and you're like, ooh, I don't know if that's going to be the perfect fit. I don't know if he's going to like the way Bill does things. This kid's not going to be bothered in the slightest. Like that is, he's going to understand how this works. And I think, when OU offered him, I think they were excited about him as they've been around the family and they've been around the kid more. It just feels like they've kind of fallen in love with him. Like, just, like he's what they're looking for. He's what they think they can build that offensive line around. And then you talk about the Darius Afalava kid. Still a long ways to go. He's talking about LSU official visits. He set up a bunch of trips. He's going to be at Oklahoma on June 7th. Not the ideal weekend for Oklahoma, but when kind of like what I was just saying, when I talked to him, the two things he talked about being really important to him were a developer of offensive linemen. Okay, huge check mark there for Oklahoma. And he talked about it being a family environment. I mean, if those are the two things you're talking about, I think Oklahoma is going to be really, really tough to beat. I know we all know the warm embrace of Brian Kelly at LSU, and we understand that that's a big draw through the tenure of Brian Kelly at Notre Dame and Cincinnati and everywhere else. But again, I just really like where Oklahoma is, and I think in years past we've seen OU lose some guys because kind of the opposite was true. Maybe those guys weren't kind of Bill Beatenbow guys, for lack of a better term. These guys feel like they completely believe in basically how Bill Beatenbow does business.
Josh, two questions for you. One, these guys both are listed as interior offensive linemen. Is that where you see both these guys playing? And are these guys both Samoan? Are they? Is that a wrong guess? Because they
no. I know. I mean, obviously they're Polynesian. I don't know. Like, I know Kade is from Saipan.
Yeah.
What his origin is beyond that, I'm not 100%. Afalava, being from Utah, I think it's a very safe assumption that he is a Poly guy. And for those that don't remember, this is the same high school that Tassili Akana came from a couple of years ago that picked Texas over Oklahoma right at the right on National Signing Day. So, obviously not the memory Oklahoma wants to replicate. But to answer the question, George, I think both could play outside, but I think both in Oklahoma's plans and probably in their brightest future, the best version of themselves, they're probably going to play inside. So I think that's where Oklahoma sees them. They're a little sturdier, stockier guys. And the one thing I can say, and I mean, you always want to be careful about generalizing. An interior guy that's poly, those guys, I like the way they play football. Like, they are usually very physical. And, dating back to some of his Texas Tech days, I believe Bill has some connection there, not to these families, but has done well with some of Samoan and Tongan background guys.
That's what I was kind of getting at there.
No, we see where you're headed with that. That's interesting, though. Now, in terms of talking about the tackles, I know that Chad Simmons, national recruiting correspondent for On3, he did run a Michael Fasusi, a little bit of a kind of a recap update on where he is with his recruitment. Obviously, some really positive things to say about Bill Beatenbow. It seems like Oklahoma's going to be in the race until they're not, right?
It does. And Eddie, to this day, do you think we got the worst Mike Fasusi, Bill Beatenbow quote there's been? Like everywhere I read, Mike is just so complimentary, loves Bill. And then he was like, he talking to us at the Under Armour camp. He's like, yeah, he's just kind of, what do you call him? Introverted or something like
something along those lines.
And you're like, yeah, I was like, that's okay. That's not where I thought you were going to go with that, but okay, it's fine. I think with Mike, there's a lot of connection between his family and Oklahoma. They really like OU a lot. I've gotten the same impression from Ty Haywood, probably even more so with Ty Haywood. But I think they really like Bill just because Bill is very straightforward, very much just this is how we see you. This is how we can help you. This is how you can help us. And it's just very direct. It's exactly what you would expect, listening to Bill Beatenbow talk for 10 seconds. But what is just going to be interesting is we know there are some very large NIL offers out there for Michael Fasusi. And I'm not telling you Oklahoma's not competing in that market. We know the Oklahoma is broke thing is down bad right now. So we're not going to get into that. But again, it's a matter of at some point you get into these numbers and it says, well, okay, we can do all this and maybe we get one of these guys, or we can split the funds around a little bit and maybe Oklahoma gets two of the guys they're really wanting, because we know they're in on 4 big-time tackles. If you could get any 2 of Michael Fasusi, Ty Haywood, Andrew Babalola, and Lamont Rogers, man, to go with Ryan Foje, that's an incredible class. Like that's exactly what you're hoping to do. And again, that's it may be only one. We've got to see what they kind of want to do with numbers here. That's going to be the interesting question for me, because I think Ryan Foje has just impressed everyone so much with where he is, how he's developing, that the talk of, well, OU's got to get 2 5-star tackles. They may already have one. So we've got to kind of see what they want to do with that. But again, I think with Fasusi, people trying to write Oklahoma off, I think they're being way too hasty with it.
It would seem that there is a particular school that their name comes up quite a bit when you're talking about recruitment. Oklahoma's going to be in recruiting battles with them from probably here, and it's not going to be anything new. They've been in recruiting battles with them before. Texas A&M, 2 names that come to mind when you're talking about Texas A&M. One of the names you had on the Hot 11, Max Granville, the 2025 edge, as well as Jonah Williams on the back end. It seems like this is going to be an Oklahoma battle, Oklahoma and a Texas A&M battle for both of these guys. Let's start with Granville, and we'll butter you up and then maybe release you here with talking about Jonah Williams. But just in terms of Oklahoma has been by to see Max Granville here in the recent memory, I guess the last 2 weeks. But anything new there in terms of his recruitment from either side in College Station and Norman?
I don't really think so, and I will say, talking to some people pretty close to this, my general impression is that Oklahoma has the best relationship with him. He feels the most comfortable with Miguel Chavis, the entire staff. He really loves just every time he's in Norman, the kind of brotherhood, the camaraderie. He likes all that. At Texas A&M, it's not that there's not a bond. It's just kind of different, where you can tell Mike Elko's very much we're going to stand on business. Like that. That's kind of the way he looks at it, and just saying, hey, we're going to develop you the best. We've got, this NIL package. We've got this. And not that OU doesn't have one. This isn't a A&M NIL thing. I'm just saying A&M is very direct and just kind of, this is what we have. This is why we're best for you. And that kind of that seems to appeal to Max at some level. At the same time, with Oklahoma, he's a quiet guy, but it seems like Oklahoma has kind of found a way to really connect with him, and there's a really strong relationship there. So I think it's going to come down to official visits for him. I don't think there's anything new. I don't think there's anything he's going to see that shocks him. He's going to take a few trips that, maybe someone really comes up and surprises him and changes his point of view. But to me, if it's not A&M or OU, I would be pretty surprised at this point. And Penn State has done a really good job with him. That's something I kind of want to see how Oklahoma handles it. Because I know when he went up to Penn State, they talked to him a lot about, guys like Chop Robinson and Isaac. I can't remember, Adika Isaac or something. The kid that went like the third round this year for Penn State. And just kind of like, look at this production, look what we've done. Oklahoma needs to sit down and have a similar conversation and say, look at all these guys in the NFL from Brent Venables and Todd Bates. Sure, it hasn't happened at Oklahoma yet, but that's just because, Oklahoma's been there for 2 or 3 years. There is a long track record of these guys producing NFL edges, and I think that would go a long way of kind of clearing maybe the final few questions that maybe, I don't know if Max has, but, the family has, just everybody around him just kind of saying, hey, this is here too. We've got this relationship, and that's great, but there are a lot of things on the field that really work for us as well.
You still think I know you have here in the Hot 11, you think in late June maybe for a decision for him?
Yeah, again, like I said, I think he'll take his officials. Max is a really even-keeled guy. Like, I last time I saw him, I got him to break into a little bit of laugh, and that felt like a real win in my life. Like, because he is very not serious, not stern at all, but just he's not going to give you too much. And so I think he'll come home. He'll sit down with his parents, kind of talk everything through. And then I would guess, it might be a 4th of July thing. I could buy that. But if he went much past the 4th of July, I'd be pretty surprised.
All right, now for the bad. We gave you a little bit of good. Now we're going to get to a little bit of the bad in terms of Oklahoma's recruitment of Jonah Williams. The great Steve Wiltfong has put in a prediction for him. Where did this go sideways, I guess, would probably be the most obvious question out there from the Oklahoma fan base. Or did it even go sideways? He's been so quiet about his decision, and he hasn't even announced anything. So, is there smoke around him in Texas A&M and possibly a decision here upcoming?
Well, let's address the elephant in the room, because I know at least half the people are like, Josh, because you made that prediction, that's where it went wrong. Stop that, because nobody's like, oh, he's not going to A&M now. Like, no,
Sure.
That hasn't come up when
Sure.
Steve Wiltfong, who clearly draws a lot more water than I do when he puts in a prediction.
Don't sell yourself short.
Well, I mean, nationally, let's just be real. But there is, and again, Steve, well-deserving of the reputation, couldn't be happier to have him on 3 with us. He is, it's tough to know, because, again, I think what you've seen is Oklahoma made a lot of run when A&M was going through all that turnover, all the Jimbo Fisher stuff, and I think they built out a lead. Now, this is where it gets in when it's always tough in Houston, because when these kids start kind of wearying of taking all the trips, and in a case like Jonah's where he's playing all the baseball and he doesn't have time to take all the trips that a lot of these other guys take, he can't go back up to Oklahoma. Guys, he hasn't been there since, January 28th, I think it was. So that's, 3 months ago, over 3 months ago. So it's pretty tough to stay in the forefront when you can't get the guy back on your home field and make things work. Now, it's an interesting situation, because to me, if Oklahoma gets him back on campus for an official visit, or even if he comes up for like a weekend, on an unofficial and just hangs out in Norman, I think Oklahoma's right back 1, 2, whatever you want to call it. They're right there in the thick of all of it. If they can't, I just think he's good. I think they're going to be on an expiring timeline, and someone's going to get him before he could take a visit in the fall. So to me, that's kind of where this pressure is. And I know Oklahoma's working on it. Everybody I've talked to says this is something that could still happen. He still might show up for, the barbecue on the 21st, the weekend before on the 14th. And, we mentioned earlier the Darius Afalava kid coming in on June 7th. That may happen too. Like, you just have to get him on campus, because we know he loves Skip Johnson. We know he loves Brandon Hall. We know he loves that whole staff. And I think it's just been he's been away from it and he's seen some other schools, and it's easy to kind of let that, that feeling that you once had kind of fade. So again, if I'm picking right now, I don't feel great about Oklahoma. Steve is again, he and I have talked. He's not out on a limb on this or anything like this. He knows what he's talking about. But I do think Oklahoma needs to find a way to get him on campus, and if that happens, then I think everything's back in play again.
Eddie, I know you've talked a lot about this, but his baseball career, I mean,
yeah,
is there a chance he doesn't even play college football?
I mean, I probably want to be the one to have a whole lot of backing in what I know about him. But just talking to one of our good buddies, Josh, Dustin McComas does a fantastic job covering the high school baseball scene and, obviously draft stuff and into college. It seems like if he wanted to participate in that avenue of playing Major League Baseball and putting his name into the draft, I think there's a decent chance that he would go high enough that he would really, truly have to make a decision. Do you want to go play college football, or do you want to go chase a baseball dream? And it was something that, is definitely Josh, I don't know how much you put into stock, just the fact that his brother has gone through this as well, getting drafted by, I believe, the Philadelphia Phillies organization. It's nothing new to this family in terms of making a decision and kind of knowing what you're signing up for when you're going to go play minor league baseball. It's not the most glamorous thing when, on the flip side of that, you could go live the 5-star life at College Station or down in Norman.
Yeah, Eddie, do you remember Chad Jones that played at LSU, played baseball and football there?
Sure.
I have heard that comparison made by a few people. And for those who don't remember, Chad was drafted 3 times out of high school and then twice out of college, and then was a 3rd-round pick of the Giants in the NFL. So, that tells you the kind of athletes we're talking about here. Jonah is a special player. It's very interesting because when I saw him at Houston Under Armour, I was talking to a couple of people and was told he'd given an indication to one reporter that if he goes in the 1st round, he's probably going to go play baseball. I've never heard that reported.
Right.
So I don't know if they decided, okay, maybe we don't want to say that, or maybe he changed his mind. It could be any of 100 things. But I definitely don't think that regardless of where he signs, the story's over. There's a very real chance that he never plays college football. That is absolutely on the table. I would be surprised, largely because he is such a talented guy and could be, he could be a 1st-round pick in baseball. He could be someday a 1st-round pick in football. That is all available to him. He's just one of those guys that is that rarely gifted. But yeah, again, I don't think there's a chance where OU fans feel sorry for about 3 months, and then they're like, "Oh well, no, never mind. It's fine." And they realize he was never coming anyway.
It is kind of interesting though, and I guess this would maybe is he going to be a December graduate of high school, or would he want to participate in his senior season of baseball? And if that was the case, then all of a sudden you're running that thing out to, I guess May or whatever, or I guess it would be February when we would have to sign football. But I guess it will be kind of interesting to see kind of what his decision is if he wants to go through his senior season of baseball, because that would mean that he's obviously not going to be a mid-year enrollee in December, and how that translates into the Major League Baseball draft. I don't know. I guess doesn't really have to make any type of decision right now, but it will be something kind of interesting to follow here in the coming, I guess, about a year or so.
Yeah, I mean, because Eddie, you think about that. I don't know what the 2025 draft date is.
I would imagine it's the first week of June of 2025, something like that.
I mean, this year's is July 14th of 2024. So you're talking well into summer workouts of whatever football program he's out. He's still finding out what his draft future is. So that he really is. He's on a really unique timeline that we don't see a lot. And because, I mean, most of these guys, like I said, you kind of know, he's a much better baseball player than he is a football player, or vice versa. Sure. And the decision just kind of, we hem and haw about it, but we all kind of know which way it's going to go. This is very Kyler Murray-ish. There is he can choose either road or he can choose both. And I think that's maybe why I lean to him staying, is almost just because wouldn't you want to know? Wouldn't you want to know what the answer is? is my future really baseball? Is my future really football? Well, you can go to the next level, and then you can kind of see how high the water is in both sports.
I will say, just real quick, in terms of Major League Baseball, I'm sure that A&M and Oklahoma are telling them the same thing, and that, I mean, you start looking at and Josh, I know that you keep up with this kind of stuff, but you start looking at mock drafts even for 2024. I think let me look real quick. The first 5 picks, all college guys. Like, the idea of going and playing in the minor leagues versus going and playing super, super high level college SEC baseball, it's an interesting conversation to be had. I think that we've seen that more and more here over the last, I would say probably last decade, but probably specifically last 5 years, of guys going, you know what, I'm going to go play 3 years of college ball instead of, making that navigation through rookie ball and low A and double A. You're still going to have to do that, but it's going to be a little bit different for somebody that is coming out having played 3 years of, big league, quote unquote, college baseball.
Well, and George, I know you want to get something, but just quickly, I mean, Eddie, like you said, I'm a big prospect guy. I love watching MLB prospects. And a couple of years ago, that Drew Jones draft, and there were I think 4 of the top 5 picks were all high school bats. And I think 3 of those 4 have just been monumental flops so far. So you kind of wonder what the temperature is for MLB teams. Like, are they, is it just one, again, that doesn't mean that forever high school bats aren't going to be good, but are you coming in at a bad time where there's kind of a lull and kind of a tempered feeling about taking a high school hitter?
Just going through the first, the MLB.com mock draft, who I think does a pretty good job. Is it still, what's his name? Jonathan Mayo. I was thinking somebody else. But either way, just a quick scan of it, it looks like damn near 26 of the top first-round draft picks would all be college guys. And half of them, it looks like, are from Wake Forest. But that's neither here nor there. So, I mean, there are more and more guys going to college. That's something that I'm sure that, is something he's going to have to think about as we move forward.
Yeah, I was just going to follow that up, Josh, by asking, where does OU kind of go now? I know Jonah Williams is a guy that they're going to recruit no matter what, and they would take him. I know we talked about the numbers. Like, if it had to be 27 and he's the 27th guy, they'll take Jonah Williams no matter what. But I know on your hot 11, you've got Amarian Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
He's a 2025 safety. I mean, where do they look now? Either way, Jonah Williams, regardless. But where do they look elsewhere?
Yeah, I think the focus is obviously Robinson. That's the guy, because if you can get, obviously you already have Marcus Wimberly committed. If you can get Amarian Robinson, then whatever else happens from there, you're fine. Like, if you get Jonah, great. If you don't, you've got 2 safeties you really liked, you're A-okay. It's not a problem. So from there, where it gets tricky is if you don't land Robinson, you don't land Williams, what do they do? There's an argument to be made where you look at that safety room where they've got, Michael Boganowski, Jaden Hardy, Reggie Powers, all, Peyton Bowen, we know will be back in 2025, or, assuming he doesn't transfer. He's not going to run out of eligibility or anything. So there is an argument to say, hey, how crazy do you want to go with numbers in a year when you're only set to graduate Billy Bowman at safety? So that's kind of the rub to me. Again, and that's the deal. That's what we were talking about with the numbers. At some point, Oklahoma is either going to have to say, we're going to have to cut some fat at some point, or we're just going to say, we're going to take a few less in the class, because we know defensive line and offensive line, they need more numbers. They're not where they need to be. They've got 3 commitments on the defensive side, 2 on the offensive side. That's 5 total. I would expect it to at least double before they're ready to be done with this class. So you're talking about 5 more right there, which pushes you to 20. And I'm hearing 22, 23. You don't have a lot of space there. So if Robinson's 1, okay, now you're down to 1 or 2. We know they want another receiver. So again, there's just a lot where the numbers start to get pretty tight. And I think with Robinson and Williams, they like them so much, they're willing to say, okay, we'll make the numbers work. But if not, there's probably kind of a break point where you just say, Marcus Wimberly is going to be our safety in this class. We'll come back in 2026 and focus on several guys we already know and like.
The numbers are starting to become a little bit more, I guess, understanding in terms of what is going to be happening in the Oklahoma secondary. Once again, Tristan Haynes, the number 15 commitment in the Oklahoma 2025 class, makes that announcement on Tuesday. And I think that we already knew that we were going to be getting out to Carl Albert to see some of their spring ball here in the coming weeks, and then obviously into the 2025 football season. But or I guess the 2024 football season, but it's going to be a little bit easier, though, that you're going to see a number of Oklahoma commits when you go see the Titans this season. All right, Josh, you headed out to you already out at one practice today. A lot going into spring ball down in the state of Texas. That fires up here in the Sooner State here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, guys, really laid out my schedule here over the next few weeks, and gonna see quite a bit. I'm trying to pull up my list here, kind of vamping for time, but there is here in a couple of days, I'm gonna see Jonathan Hatton be out in San Antonio for a 6:30 a.m. practice. Pretty excited about that kind of deal. But then later that day, gonna go see Smith Arogbo, the big defensive end from Hastings that Oklahoma's got set up for an official visit. For those that aren't familiar, he's on 3. He's number 26 overall player in the class. A guy that clearly, it's such a broken record, but a guy that loves Miguel Chavis. I mean, this is another one of those guys. I've seen some people compare him to PJ Adebaraway. I think as time goes on and he continues to physically develop, he has that sort of ceiling. I want to watch him practice. I want to watch him work a little bit. I've talked to a few coaches that have seen him work over the first week or so of spring practice, and it sounds like it's been a little back and forth. Sometimes he's really good. Sometimes, just kind of a guy that going through his senior spring practice. He knows it's not the end of the world, but still going to see a bunch more. Trying to pull up again, trying to find my list here. Going to see Bridgeland, going to go see Ryan Foje, planning to see Torrey Blaylock. And then we get into Oklahoma where you mentioned Carl Albert. The really exciting part, Carl Albert is going to play host on a team camp and get to see him and Antonio Kade Ogamoro. So don't have to go down to Elgin. He's coming to Oklahoma City, get to see the big guy work for the first time in person. And again, I will be making 5 flights to Oklahoma between camps and spring practices from about May 20th to June 20th. So out of 30 days, 13, I'm in the state of Oklahoma doing different stuff. So we will have a lot of firsthand videos, pictures, content, all kinds of stories. So it should be another really, really busy summer on top of all the official visits going on and undoubtedly the commitments to follow.
More than welcome to stay on my couch, Josh.
George, I really appreciate that. There's nothing like being the old guy with kids sleeping on the young guy's couch to make you feel, really validated in life.
It gets you back to your roots. That's kind of where, I think this time of the year with Thunder playoffs and all that kind of stuff, getting back to your roots, waking up on a couch, not really knowing
He'll be in town
the
for the finals.
Before.
That's right around the NBA finals.
That's perfect.
So
it's perfect.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Well, I think go ahead.
I was going to say the last Thunder game I saw in Oklahoma City was Game 4 against the Warriors when they dropped the hammer on them. So I left, guys, and things haven't been as great. So maybe it's me, maybe it's not. I don't want to take credit, but still almost burned the Thunder hat that I wore that night a few months later. But that's another story for another day.
It's time to exercise those demons, and I think with you in town, it would be a lot easier to make the sell to somebody else that maybe Sooner Scoop should just fund a trip to the Paycom Center and we could all go together to the game, maybe floor seats.
That seems right. Like that, I don't see how that could be any problem. NBA Finals games, the massive income
it's a small market.
Of Sooner Scoop.
It's a small market.
There we go.
It's a small market. We'll figure that out at that point. Still got to get through Dallas, Thunder, and 4. All right, Josh, we appreciate it. It's going to be interesting here over the next couple weeks as we do enter kind of that spring period as well as / all of a sudden it's going to be June 1 and summer camps are going to be firing up here for Brent Venables in Norman. So we will kind of keep you up to date on that. Diamond Sports is firing up. Big 12 tournament coming up this weekend for OU softball. rolls into the NCAA tournament. OU baseball in the mix in the Big 12 conference race, looking for their first regular season title in school history. So that's where we'll end this recruiting report today. Good time to join SoonerScoop.com. YouTube viewers, once again, 2 months, $1, promo code OU1. OU1 for the promo code for 2 months to SoonerScoop.com. All it costs you is $4. Pretty simple. For George, Josh, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page.